Welcome to By George, an 80 Players podcast here at the George Theater. I am your host, Miranda Zapes, and today I have with me the artistic producer of the George Theater.
Hi there. My name is Kevin Dean.
Kevin also co-playwrote A Texas Carol, which is the next show that we have coming up. So we're going to get into all of those details. I want to hear about what the writing process was like, see if we have any secrets for what's coming up in the future. But we'll just start with, Kevin, how did you wind up here at the 80 Players?
So I was poking around Dallas. I went to an actor's conservatory there, and I graduated and was just kind of doing film and television and commercial work in the Dallas area. Back then, Walker, Texas Ranger shot in Dallas. A lot of commercials shot in Dallas. Barney was in Dallas. A lot of stuff was out there. Wishbone. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of opportunities to do film or on-camera work. And so I was doing all those, doing some theater. I was in the Batman stunt show at Six Flags Over Texas in Arlington.
Really?
Yeah, I was the host and the penguin. So I had two roles. And the entire show was about 18 minutes, and it was pre-recorded. So all the voices, like Batman, the penguin, all those voices were pre-recorded. And everybody else were stunt performers, except me. I was the only actor.
Yeah.
So I would come out and and I would introduce the scene. So they'd hit play, there would be music, and I'd come out and introduce the scene, and then I'd run off stage and get into my penguin outfit, and then come on stage and get beat up by Batman, and then go off stage and take that off and come back out and introduce the next scene. Mm-hmm. And there are like 3 or 4 scenes. But and we did something like 5 or 6 shows a day. There's only like 18 minutes. So we'd go out and do the show and then go back to the locker room or go hang out at the park. We'd just go ride rides. We had free access to the whole park.
Yeah.
So, that was my summer. That was great. That was like the summer of 98, I think.
Okay, I was just about to ask you because I went to Six Flags all the time as a child, but that was a little bit before I was.
Okay, yeah, this was summer of 98, and
yeah.
It was fun. I like most of them. This is the best job I've ever had. Now, I don't know what I'm still doing here at the 80 Players.
Wow.
That, I was just living off whatever I made on, commercials and residuals and, playing a lot of video games and,
what any graduate does afterwards.
Yeah.
Still trying to figure it out. And then you eventually moved down to Houston.
Yeah. So a girl I was going to church with was from Houston, and she asked if I had ever heard of the 80 Players. And I hadn't. And again, this was the late 90s, so none of us really had the internet, or at least understood how to access it. And so I called, and they sent me some paperwork, and it looked like a fun place. It was a theater, and they had a children's theater, and they had a touring company. And so a buddy of mine came down, and we auditioned, and my buddy didn't get cast, so he moved to LA, and I moved down here, and I'd only planned to stay for about a year, but just kind of fell in love with the place and the mission. And actors really just want to work consistently.
Yeah.
And I was at a theater company that was hiring me consistently to be in shows. And so I was like, man, doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah. And so you were an actor for a while with the 80 Players, or you did their internship?
Yeah. So I was an intern. And then my second year, I toured with the National Touring Company. And so we went up and down the country performing in churches and colleges and schools and some other small theaters. And that's where I met my wife. Mm-hmm. So she was an intern, and she toured with us. And then fell in love and sort of dated in secret. We didn't tell anybody that we were dating.
Yeah.
You just never know.
I was going to say, was there like a reason for that? Was it like the company wouldn't let you? Or?
No, the company didn't care.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. So many people have come through here and met and gotten married and started a family. No, the company didn't. I guess the 80 Players were like the original eHarmony.
Yeah.
People would come here and meet and fall in love. People in our business, and we were touring a lot, so we were in the back of a van, and so we were spending a lot of time with other folks that we just didn't, want to bring them into that.
No, of course. Okay.
And I'm pretty private to begin with, so yeah, I was just like, you know what? If the less they know, the better.
Yeah. Okay.
I think people suspected. I'm sure they did.
No,
I'm sure we were terrible.
I was going to say, you see 2 people going off together.
Yeah, where are they going?
Wonder what's happening there.
Why are they always going to get coffee?
What, are they not like us?
Yeah, what's going on?
And then you transitioned into, you were over the Children's Academy, correct?
Yeah, so shortly after my tour of duty, so to speak, was done on the touring unit, I started working with the children's theater. So I oversaw that. We produced, at the time, I think we were producing 5 children's shows a year. Actually scaled it back to 4. Children's theater at the time was performing at St. Luke's United Methodist over off of Edlow and Westheimer. They have a rotunda theater, a theater in the round that seats about 150. And so we performed all our children's shows there. We rehearsed there. We performed there. Work with our founder and artistic director at the time, Jeanette Cliff George, on finalizing what that season was going to look like. And then we'd cast the shows, and we would open our season with Christmas, and then do something in the winter, something in the spring, and then we'd do a Bible classic in the summer, something that would be based on a biblical story. Like we did Zach and Jack once, which is sort of a modern day Zacchaeus.
Yeah.
We did, Joshua and the Torah, which is a musical Jeanette wrote, which is about Joshua and the Battle of Jericho.
Oh, nice.
So, we would always do stuff like that.
Yeah. And then that's what ultimately transitioned you into being an artistic producer.
Yeah. So, as we started to make plans to move into this place, Jeanette was obviously getting older, and I was already working with her on script selection for the main stage. So once upon a time, we had a script selection committee that would sort of take Jeanette's ideas and then read a bunch of scripts and filter it down, distill it down to a list of shows, and then say, hey, what do you think about these shows? And then she would kind of go through and say, yes, no, let's add this one or whatever. Yeah. She was getting older, and we were needing to program here, and she needed a little more assistance. They moved me into the associate artistic director position to just sort of kind of help along with children's theater stuff, because at the time we still had it. And then also the main stage, and, working through who's going to direct these shows, who's going to design these shows, who's going to be in these shows, working with her on making those decisions.
That's awesome. And so that's what started you. That's where you were associate artistic producer. And so that's what you do now on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So my focus is executing the season.
Yeah.
Right. And so that starts, depending on how often we plan, a year and a half in advance. So we already have a pretty good idea of what we're going to do 2024, 2025.
Yeah.
And so then we're thinking about, okay, so if we close the season with this in 2025, what do we want to open with going into 25, 26? So
exactly.
We're trying to think pretty far in advance. But then, once you get this point, so we have a pretty good idea what we're doing next year, then it'll be about obtaining the rights from the publishing houses. And then once we have the rights, then we can start, talking to who are these directors that we want, and designers, who do we want to design these shows, and start thinking about auditions and actors. And so, it's a process. And then once all that stuff is cast, you start eventually rehearsing for the first show. Sometimes you're rehearsing the show while you're casting the next one. It just depends.
Wow.
And so, it's just working with the director to make sure, we're achieving a shared vision for the show.
Yeah.
And I've got a great team that works with me. Michael Mullins, who's our design and production manager, he works most specifically with the designers on the technical aspect of it, on achieving their vision for, sets and such. And Samantha Dante, she's our costume shop manager, so she works with the costume designers. And so, together we all work together to try to, good grief, put on a play.
Exactly. Just try and, I don't know, make art, tell a story.
Tell a story.
It's fascinating because, I come from a cinema world. And so I know, like, producer, they're very, logistical. They're pulling the whole team together. But it's for, sometimes, just one feature film. And so, like, you get the team together, you do everything in pre-production, and then it's off into the races and you move on to the next thing. But this is something that, like, you're planning, like, basically 6 movies at once. Yeah.
You're planning that far out, right?
Yeah.
And you're thinking, and obviously when you work that far out, life changes for people.
Yeah.
We have actors that say, oh, I can't, I'm moving. Or, sometimes it's, hey, I got another gig that's actually better for my career and for my family.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's fine. Thank you for the notice,
Of course.
That's never ideal, but you get it. They're actors. We're all actors. We've been there. I've been there before, and you've got an obligation to, what's best for you and your family. So there's always curveballs, in any given production. And so what you try to do is control what you can control and make sure that you trust the people that are in place with stuff like that, because inevitably something's going to come. Someone's going to throw you a curveball. Some curveball is going to happen, and you're going to have to react to it.
Yeah.
So if you're confident with all this other stuff that you can control, you can focus energy on solving these problems that come up.
Exactly.
Rather than having to solve problems.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
No, of course.
You know.
So, I mean, in the marketing world, we're also like right there with you. I almost feel like we're already planning a year ahead or 2 years ahead. I think it surprises a lot of people to hear that we plan so far in advance. How do you even start going about planning? I mean, for 25, 26.
So, we it's always smart to think about what's the show that closes your season, and how is that going to relate to the show that's going to open your season? Because recently we've been closing our season with a big musical, right? Which could be a cast of upwards of 25, and you've got 12 to 14 folks in your orchestra.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of moving parts, a lot of costumes, a lot of set pieces. And so your team, the production team, spends a lot of time building up to that. And then once that's done and open, then we're in summertime, and then we're planning for the first show of the season, right? So do you want another great big show after coming off a big show? Or how does that balance? And if you are going to do a big show, because sometimes you do, I mean, that's just it's what's best for the organization, what's best for the community. That's why you plan so far in advance, so that you're like, well, if we're going to do 2 great big shows back to back, how do we execute it on the front end? Right? So that means maybe we bump up some of our goals for the summer show. That way it gives us some more breathing room in advance of, going into the fall show. Yeah. So it's just thinking through details like that, which I'm not the best at. I've got a team that is really detail oriented, that really helps think through a lot of those problems. Yeah. They see those potential problems, and so that we can react to them. But oftentimes, you wanna kick your season off, with a bang. Yeah. You want to say, this is our new season, and this is what it's because a lot of times the folks may not have seen the summer show, so the last time they've seen a show or been in your building was in the spring or before.
I see. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, and honestly, it's about finding what's the right story. Yeah. Fall's, depending on the show you pick, fall can be a difficult show to sell because it's back to school. Kids are back in August, but parents are gearing up. There's sports, there's baseball, soccer, football, gymnastics. I mean, there's just a lot of competition. Yeah. And so the fall is if you don't have something that is a title that's going to draw people, sometimes it's a challenge to get people engage them in the fall. Like one of the highest grossing shows we've ever done was in the fall was The Hiding Place.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Right? But it had a huge audience. I mean, it was a book. Yeah. That particular story is woven into the fabric of the 80 player tapestry because our founder, Jeanette Cliff George, played Corrie ten Boom in the film version. Yeah. And so we wanted to honor her and honor that story. And obviously, in Christian circles, The Hiding Place is very, very well known. The story of Corrie ten Boom and the concentration camp and all that stuff. So it had a wide appeal. I mean, we sold like gangbusters for that show. But then again, we've done one coming out of COVID, we did a 2-person show, Dear Jack, Dear Louise. Yeah. Which I directed, and I love that show. And it's about it's a love story that is between a soldier in the Army during World War II and an actress in New York trying to make a living, and they actually don't meet until after the war. They fall in love through letters. Yeah. And it's based on a true story. Ken Ludwig, the playwright, it's based on his parents' story. Like he found their letters and sort of adapted this into a play. And it's just a beautiful show. Yeah. But not a lot of people came to see it, because it's not well known. Yeah. And so it's just, the fall is always a challenge. Is how are we going to start the season off to create some momentum while also, being responsible responsible to a budget.
No, of course.
Knowing
yeah.
we got to sell tickets to it.
And I can't imagine, like, from a budget standpoint of, like, that first show has to, like, it kind of sets the tone for what the rest of the season is going to be like. And so if it's not, I see the struggle of trying to get through the rest of.
Yeah, you want to come out of the gate firing, you don't want to limp out.
No, of course. Let's talk about A Texas Carol. So that's the show that we're coming up next. That should be opening, a week from hopefully when this episode goes out. You co-wrote it with our executive artistic director, Jamie McGann. What was that process like? Where did the idea come from?
So I guess the things that we write, and I don't think this is normal. I think this is so backwards. But even Texas Carol, it started with a title.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's usually the last thing that you come up with.
I was going to say, when I'm doing writing and I write very little, I always have to come up with a title first before I can move on.
I think it helps.
Yeah.
A lot of times the titles change.
Yeah.
As the story changes or whatever. But so we had picked our season. We had picked last season already, but we hadn't settled on a Christmas show. Mm-hmm. And there was one Christmas show that we really liked. But it had just closed off of Broadway, and we were waiting to see if we could get the rights to it. Mm-hmm. And they weren't at a point where they could focus on that. So we were like, man, we got to do something.
Yeah.
And it was like the night before our gala when we were going to announce it.
Really?
And so Jamie and I, we're sitting down and we're spitballing ideas and titles. And I think it was Jamie that was like, what about a Texas Carol? I'm like, that's got a nice ring to it. I was like, I think that's appealing. Like if I hear that title, I'm like, oh, I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. Is it somehow related to a Christmas Carol?
Mm-hmm.
No, not in any way, shape, or form.
No.
But you don't know that.
Yeah.
And so
it could be.
And we didn't know that either. Maybe it was gonna. Who knows?
Yeah.
But so we were like, let's do it. Texas Carol. It'll be about. We knew it was going to be about a family at Christmas. That's kind of all we knew.
Yeah.
And that the family was going to come and discover that the matriarch, the great grandmother, had passed away, and then it was like, how are we going to deal with that?
Yeah.
It's kind of all we knew.
From the very beginning, you knew that that's what it was.
We knew it. I think so. Like because we landed on the title, and then shortly thereafter started fleshing out what it could be.
Yeah.
We knew we wanted it to be a comedy, in sort of where we sort of tie everything together, not necessarily with a pretty little bow, but where we at least sort of address all of the characters' sort of hurts.
Yeah.
And so we gave that title to marketing, and they came up with. We hadn't even created this character yet, I don't think. Or if we did, I know we didn't tell marketing. But like the original marketing was a Texas Carol, and then it had a Santa Claus in overalls with a cowboy hat. And we're like, I bet we could do that.
Yeah, we could fit that in.
And so we wrote the character Jerry in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and then I guess, we had decided that, and we kind of knew basically what our story was, but then we went on a writer's retreat that summer, and just really sort of figured out the story and the characters. Like, who are these people? Where are they coming from? Why are they here now? What's going on in their lives? What pain do they have, or are they burying, or what are they running from?
Yeah.
And so once we figured all that out, then we're like, okay, so this is sort of who these people are. This is sort of the overarching story. Now, how do we get from point A to point B to point C to the end? And so then we started to beat out, these are the story beats, these are the scenes. And then, he'd take a scene and I'd take a scene, and then, we'd flip flop and then go to the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And until we had it done. I know that we knew that Meemaw was going to, the gifts from Meemaw were going to be what sort of tied everybody, or I guess, bring closure, and provide healing for each one of the family members. So we knew that's what we wanted. We didn't have any idea what those gifts were yet. And that was the last thing I think that we wrote.
Yeah.
And I think that was Jamie, because we needed to get a production draft, and we just hadn't landed on what are these. I mean, some of them we knew, or we knew we had an idea about. But then he went off one night and kind of came up with it.
Yeah.
and then brought it to me the next day, and I'm like, oh man, this is great. And then we just started editing and tweaking and polishing from there.
Yeah.
To get it down to what it is. But yeah, it's nice. And it's what I love about it. Like, I initially pitched the idea to Jamie that we see Meemaw at the end somehow. And we kind of vacillated on that back and forth. And then we ultimately cut it because you hear Meemaw. You don't hear her, you don't hear an actress's voice, but you hear her voice through her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And that allows people to sort of project their own Meemaw into that. Because everybody's got that. She may be a grandmother or an aunt, but there's that person in your family that just is the wise, wisdom-giving person that loves everyone unconditionally, that knows what's going on in your life and knows the right thing to say at the right time.
Yeah.
And that's who Meemaw is.
Yeah.
And everybody has that person. And so by not ever seeing her, you're allowing everybody to sort of see who they have in their life.
They can put their person as that character.
Yeah, which is a nice touch.
Yeah. Like having written it or been a co-writer on it, and then also being the director and the artistic producer. You talked about at the beginning, you get to bring all these pieces together. You being all of those positions really...
I wouldn't normally recommend that.
Yeah.
Just in terms of, because I think each one of those roles has its own responsibilities.
Yeah.
And is important. But he and I had built out the world pretty well, I think. We knew what we wanted this house to look like.
Yeah.
Or at least we knew how let me put it this way. We knew how we wanted this house to feel. When you walked into the theater, we wanted you to feel warm and welcome and that you've been here before to some degree. Yeah. And creating that world was pretty, especially we got a great designer, Ryan McGettigan, who really took that and ran with it. And so directing it, I knew who these characters are, and to me, I think I'm by no means a visionary sort of, cutting edge, state of the art director. I'm more of a storyteller, I think, and I try my best to hire the right actors because I find that they always bring things that you don't anticipate. Yeah. In telling the story. And if you get the right actors, man, they can hide all the other flaws you have as a director. Yeah. They can cover it right up and make you look a lot better than you are. And that's what last year we did that. This year we've got all but two cast members have returned, and the two that we brought in are just amazing. They fit right in. You're like, yep, I can see how these folks are related. And it's just a joy to watch them work, and it's been fun to revisit it with a group of people who you've figured out a lot already. Yeah. And so now, you're not starting from zero. You're starting from kind of a performance level that you've come from because you did it the last year. And now you can just sort of play and search for more nuance. Yeah. And deepen relationships and stuff. And I think that's been helpful to the two new cast members. I know, on the one hand, because we talked about it, you're like, I'm walking into this environment where everybody else is like so far ahead of me. Yeah. I'm not even off book. I've only read the script however many times. And that can be intimidating. But the cast they all fit right together. Yeah. And, I told them, I'm like, listen, if one of the ways I'll define success for this show is if at the end of this process, we laughed at every rehearsal, and at the end of the day, we all want to work together again. Yeah. Because I think storytelling is fun, and it should be fun. It's make-believe. We're grown up. We're playing grown-up make-believe, and we're playing dress-up, and that's fun. It's advanced, and it's, it's not without its nuance or, but, it's at the end of the day, we're just playing pretend, and that's fun. It should be. Yeah. And, yeah.
Went to a couple of the rehearsals. I think two of them. I went to the very first one when you guys were doing a table read, and then the first or a couple days after you guys had originally gotten on stage, the designers run. I've heard from cast members that the rehearsal process has been really quick, and that everybody's just kind of picking up where they left off. What is it like as the director seeing everything come together so quickly?
I don't know what I'm going to do this week.
Okay.
There's not a lot of problems areas.
Yeah.
So my objective is to make sure that our two new actors get the repetition that they need.
Yeah. Okay.
To make sure they feel comfortable and help be there for them to shepherd them through this process. Are you have any questions? What's not working for you? And sort of work through it from that regard, because, it's a Texas Carol, it's not Long Day's Journey into the Night. I mean, or Shakespeare. I mean, it's a fun family comedy.
Yeah.
And, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. But, so how do because we're not reinventing anything, so much has been discovered. It's about, all right, what new discoveries can we make? And how do we keep those grounded in reality?
Yeah.
And then helping the two new actors sort of feel comfortable and make sure they get the repetition that they need.
Yeah.
Because everybody else has had a whole run.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's in their bones. So when you watch it, it doesn't look like our two new actors. I mean, they
have
all
missed a beat. Yeah,
no, not at all. I mean, I told them they're ready for an audience. They're ready for somebody other than me to respond to them.
I think so too.
And that's so strange. we haven't even teched it. We teched this weekend.
Yeah.
So I've been in shows where the show wasn't as far along as this one is, like after tech. You're like, oh,
wow.
Man, some actors still on other lines. We don't know, some cues. I mean, some stuff hasn't been ironed out. So they're in a really, really good spot.
That's awesome. What can audiences expect going in? I mean, if they saw the show last year, I mean, it's the exact same show, but these nuances that you're talking about.
It's the same script.
Yeah.
And there are similarities because it's the same script. But the two new actors they're very different than the actors last year in all the right ways, and that's what's kind of fun to see when you change one or two things in a process, the ripple effect of that, some of it's very subtle, some of it's very drastic in very good ways, and it's fun to see various interpretations of the same lines and same words, and that's why actors, that's why I love actors, because they find those differences because they'll make those characters their own. And that's been a joy to just sit back and watch these guys. Oh yeah, because I knew I had certain bits and certain rhythm and timing when I wrote it. And then you start to cast the show the first time and you're putting the puzzle pieces together, and then you realize, oh yeah, well the chemistry between these actors produces this, and you start learning all these new things. Well, that's kind of how it is with these two new actors, like two new ingredients to this stew, and it's really turning out mixing really well.
That's all right. I have a few more questions for you just to kind of like round out the episode.
Great.
I like to first lightning round question. You were a performer. You are a performer. What was your biggest mishap that you've had happen on stage?
Oh my gosh. Well, I can think of a few right off the top of my head, but the first one, I can remember we were doing a production of The Secret Garden. This was while we were still at the Rotunda. And Marion Arthur Kirby, who plays Jerry in Texas Carol, happened to write and direct that piece.
Okay.
And so we were in front of an audience, and the way that the stage was configured was there was, steps down into the rotunda, and then the audience was on either side, right? And so I was standing on the aisle getting ready to deliver the narration, and man, I just went blank.
No.
I just was like, I got nothing.
There's nothing here. Empty.
And then Marion happened to be sitting right there, and he was the playwright. And he just leaned over and said, whatever my line was. And I was like, oh. And then I was able to say Milani.
Yeah.
And the show was able to go on. But I had nothing, man. You just drew a blank. I was just standing there.
Sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Sometimes it doesn't fire, man.
So was that your next line?
Yeah, he just gave me my cue.
Yeah.
But if he wasn't sitting there, I don't know what would have happened.
No, we just would have stood up there for a couple minutes. They shouted out from the crowd.
Yeah.
We're doing a Texas Carol. It's the holiday season. Mm-hmm. Thanksgiving's coming up. Christmas is coming up. What is one of your favorite family traditions during this holiday season?
Oh. Well, my mom just passed away. And one of the things we used to do as a child growing up, my mom collected the Department 56 Snow Village, right? So it's a ceramic village.
Yeah.
And they've got, they've been around for 50 or however long they've been around. But we used to give my mom a piece every year. So she had over 30 something pieces. And so every Thanksgiving, we would get it out and that'd be the first thing we set up for Christmas. And, and as the years went on, we had more pieces and more pieces and more pieces. And so we had this pretty impressive little village. Mm-hmm. And we would do that every Thanksgiving. And my mom wanted me to have the Snow Village after she passed away so that I could continue to do it. Because my sister has one. She started a collection of her own.
I see.
So she's got, her own village. And so for me, it was always setting it up with my mom.
Yeah.
So she, handed it down to me. And so just literally yesterday, I drove up to Athens to pick it all up. Mm-hmm. Because my family's coming here for Thanksgiving. And so we're going to set it up at my house for this year, for the first time. Of course, my mom won't be there, and that's very, very sad. And I'm sure that will be, sad. But yeah, that's always been my favorite Christmas tradition.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I know that it's been tough. But thank you. My final question is, I want to bring attention to your shirt. So you have a Dallas St. Texas Man shirt on. It's a line from A Texas Carol.
Yes.
It's to represent like the feud between the Aggies, Texas A&M, and UT. Mm-hmm. And so I want to ask you whether, you're a sports guy. I don't know if you root for one of these teams or not, but if you had to choose one of these teams, which team are you on?
That's a great question, man, because as much as I love sports and college sports, I didn't go to A&M. I'm actually wearing the Crimson shirt. We have a burnt orange version for Longhorn fans. This has just happened to be a better color for my complexion than burnt orange, and I was going to be on camera. I root. This is going to sound like a cop-out. I'll tell you who my favorite team is. But
neither.
No, I root for Texas teams. Like I always root for all the sports teams in Texas.
Okay.
Like in terms of, especially college. Mm-hmm. So I always root for. I think college football is more interesting when A&M's really good, when Longhorns are really good, because they have this heated rivalry, and now they'll eventually both be in the SEC. I miss the Southwest Conference days, but I don't know, we won't get. That's a whole other podcast.
You're saying things are going over my head.
Yeah.
I don't know.
My wife went to Baylor.
Okay.
And so I guess by marriage I'm a Baylor Bear. So I root for Baylor.
Okay.
I don't know if the fan base in Houston warrants, a Dallas, because it's in Waco, which is not far from Dallas.
Okay.
So I'm excited for A&M fans because they're going to find themselves a brand new head coach, and good for you guys. But I'm always interested in what the Longhorns are doing. I think one of the Mannings is going to be their quarterback of the future. So Arch. So I keep up with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice to dodge the question.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Like I don't live or die for either of them. I like it when they both do well.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode of By George. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. We have a couple more Texas Carol episodes coming up in the future. We recorded today in our photo booth in the lobby. So be sure when you come and watch a Texas Carol, you come and get your photo taken. It is part of like the set that we have for our podcast this season. Be sure when you come in as well to get your Dallas Ain't Texas Man shirts. You got to pick your team. Let's not be Kevin.
Or pick which one fits your complexion.
There you go. You could do that too, or both. Listen,
both,
if you love all of the Texas
I'll get
teams,
both.
get them all. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye. This has been By George, an 80 Players at the George Theater podcast, hosted and produced by Miranda Zapes. Listen anywhere you listen to podcasts and follow us on Instagram at By George Theater. That's THEATRE. Sure to like, share, and subscribe. And By George, we'll see y'all next time.
Didn't know who I was going to root for until I was still a Cowboy fan. But then when Bob McNair brought the Texans, I think it was in 2002. I was just so much fun to sort of get in on the ground floor.
Yeah.
And I still, I don't hate the Cowboys like a lot of folks in Houston do. There's like a lot of visceral hate.
No, yeah.
And there's a lot of Cowboy fans that are like, how could you possibly be a Texans fan now? It's because I live here. This is my home. And I'm a hometown team kind of guy. But yeah.
Did you ever play sports?
I did. I played football for a while until I realized I was contact averse, or collision averse. Okay. I guess that's the better way to phrase it. You kind of have to be collision minded to play football.
Yeah.
And I like to avoid collisions. So I played baseball and basketball.
There you go.
And eventually found my way to basketball and almost played college basketball. I was about that close, but I didn't get any taller. I stopped growing at about 5'10". And, so my ceiling was very low.
Yeah, I was going to say, that kind of cut you off right there.